Welcome to the Energizing America Podcast, where we talk all things business, energy, and people, and why we need it in our communities and business. Enjoy this episode. You will not want to miss it. Like you guys know, as we've been talking as a leadership team, we're struggling on capturing that new client. And it seems like every time we get a client, that's once we have them, it's easy. Our guys go out and they energize, and that's the easy part. The difficult part is how do we get that client to call us? How do we meet that client? We had an awesome meeting. Calvin, you weren't there, but you got filled in on it. Clayton and I went down with the new owners of a mill here in town, and phenomenal meeting. And I know that once our guys go there, it's going to be game over. We got it. I want your guys' thoughts on how can we do when we talk about marketing and who Wescom is podcast a spot that you see that we could fit into? And if so, what are the things that we would highlight and what would we do? But you guys haven't been involved in the meetings that I have regarding podcasts. So maybe you just have some questions. So tell me even just how you're feeling with the word podcast and what comes to mind and how does that fit into Wescom? What do you think, John? We'll start with you.
Well, we had some conversation about 3 months ago or so. And at that point, podcasts to me were an old-fashioned thing that's like talk radio used to be back in the day. People don't do that anymore. Like, who listens to talk radio? But after the conversation with you and I started investigating and talking to different people, and the amazing thing to me was from young to old, a lot of people get their information from podcasts. And podcasts cover such a wide range of subjects that it doesn't really matter what the subject is. If you have an interest in it, you're going to find something about it in a podcast. And by having a podcast, you are by default an expert. Like, you're believable at that point. You're putting information out there that other people would like to hear because they're following you on your podcast. So you are an authority figure at that point. So when I think about this podcast, in my mind, it's especially from the HR side of things, but the whole side of things, it's like words are a very powerful tool. So how do we paint this picture to let everybody out there know what Wescom is? Because if they knew, A, they'd want to come work here, and B, they would want to do business with us because we're that great. And it's not in a conceited way. We just have something special and something unique, and our ability to serve clients is so, maybe the bad news is the bar out there in the world is so low that it's easy to exceed it. I don't know if maybe that's all it is. But I think through a podcast, we can help paint that picture, I guess, of what we are and what we're about, where we're going. Like, this is really exciting and cool, and get on the bus, people. So
you're excited about podcasts? You think
I think it's absolutely another tool to be used to spread the word.
What about you, Jeremy?
Well, I'm not all that familiar with podcasts. I'm kind of from that older generation, but just talking to even my own kids and their businesses and the different businesses they deal with on a daily basis, the podcasts are another way of this content marketing you hear so often. And like I said, I'm not real familiar with it, but I think, like John said, Wescom wants to energize America. That's our vision. That's truly what we want to do. And in order to get our story out there to all the people around us in our community, not only in Duluth and Superior and the surrounding areas, but across the country. If we can do this and tell our story to the people, what we do, why we do it, how we do it, it's going to get our story out there. I think that's very important. And it shows with this that the people behind it, I think people want to know, businesses want to know, who are the people doing our work? Why are they doing our work? Do we trust them? And I think they see that it's authentic. I guess that's my take on it.
So what about, you and I had a little bit of conversation. Of course, like any other busy organization, half the time we're texting each other. These big decisions, like what about the cost of marketing? Is this like, what are your concerns with it? I got to believe there's some, right? I mean, we had some conversation.
Yeah, late Friday afternoon.
Yeah. That's what business ownership looks like, right?
Yeah.
We're trying to eat dinner and we're talking about a Monday morning decision.
No, and like I said, I had some little bit of conversation with my sons and their businesses with the marketing, and I have a little bit of it's a challenge for me because I don't see what's behind the scenes. Like, I'm so tangible in many ways that I want to know that for $1, I'm getting my $1 worth of value or whatever that product or service is. So with content marketing, podcast, all these different social media platforms, they're all important, But that's the only thing. I just don't have enough knowledge behind it to make a good decision on that for this amount of money we're getting XYZ, or I'm also a ROI guy. Like, I want to know what my return on that investment is, and maybe that's hard to quantify with content marketing and podcasts and all these different things that we're talking about doing.
Well, I absolutely think it's hard to quantify, but it's much like our conversations last week when we were talking about various things going on, like down in our Permian operations, right? And this little buzzword about KPIs, key performance indicators, and how do we measure and what's everyone's scorecard. I'm confident we can come up with a KPI for our content marketing. But I think it's important that you, as a CFO, continue to hold us accountable to that as we go down this road of content marketing. That you remind us, hey, there is a expectation of return, and what is that? So I appreciate you bringing that up, that we have to have that as part of our conversation. It is so hard to measure our marketing. Recently, I was telling somebody our billboards. First time ever, we budgeted for billboards this year. We put them up in the Duluth and the Twin Ports community. And I was telling our salesman, like, that's such a waste of money. I don't believe there's anything going on with that. 2 days later, I'm meeting with our solar specialist, and John was in the meeting with us, and we're just rehashing with Corey that how can we do a better job getting our story out about solar. And he takes off. It was an awesome meeting, good couple-hour conversation. He leaves again Friday afternoon. Right before I left, I logged onto our Facebook account, and there was a message in there that we had put out a social media video about solar, and an individual tagged another person, that you can reference her name and whatever. And he said, hey, check these guys out. I see them all over Duluth. And the reality is we have not done a ton of solar projects in Duluth. I hate to be so brutally honest, but in that person's head, he had seen us all over in Duluth doing solar projects because of a billboard. But earlier that week, I just told our salesman it was a waste of money. I have no idea how to measure that ROI when it comes to marketing, but that just popped in my head.
Well, I think we got to be okay with giving it time too. Like, that's part of getting your story out there. Is the ROI is important, but even more important is what do we want to do long term? Our vision is Energizing America. And if this podcasting and these different social media platforms or this content marketing that we can do, it's all going to benefit that.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, John?
It's interesting because I had a friend forward a podcast about why the shale play in America is going to die. I listened to the whole thing, and I thought, this guy don't know what he's talking about, because I didn't agree with him. So I think that's the key, is you got to find people that want to listen to you and they like what you're saying. And I think that's what's behind it, as far as I understood, is that's the people that you're going to have listening to you are people that agree with you. People can go out there and, like someone said, talk radio is kind of dying because you're targeting such a broad audience. Where with this, people will go to the people they agree with. So I don't know how we capture that. I know that that's a thing and something we should try to do. But I guess I'm not sure how, as a company, what we're going to target and who's going to want to hear us. Maybe they want to hear you.
No, they don't. See, the thing is they want to hear about Wescom. But in order for them to hear about Wescom, they need a conduit. It tends to be, as a leader of an organization, they look to you. But really, you have to build your personal, from what I understand, you have to build your personal brand in order to build your company brand, right? Our personal brand is already built. I wouldn't want to be on a bus with any other people than you folks. So if that's already built, we just haven't done a good job telling the world about it. And so if we can figure that out, channel that energy to the right people, I think we'll have success. Before I forget, John, I'm writing down a to-do because I absolutely need to listen to why the shale play is going to die and rebut everything in there. Did you know oil is $71 a barrel this morning, you guys? Like, how is that going to die?
Right. This was pre-COVID.
It was pre-COVID, nonetheless.
Pre-COVID, yeah. The shale is going to die. But there was not enough information behind it for me to believe it. So there is something about sharing content, but it does have to be somewhat believable.
Was this your first podcast you ever listened to?
I think it may have been.
Really?
Yeah.
So have you heard your kids talk about podcasts or anyone? Okay. So this is a new deal for you.
It's pretty new.
Would it freak you out if you knew that this was going to be a several $1,000 investment for us to add to our marketing?
I trust you that it's the money's there.
Mistake number one, right?
No, it wouldn't freak me out. I do think it's important. Me and John have had the conversation before. It's like, why don't we have people lined up at our door to come to work here or want to work here? Because everyone that does loves it. So what's missing? And I think that's it. We're not out there.
You mentioned this. I got to tell you a story that happened last week. There was a gentleman who stopped by the office. I had a little deal with him, evening deal. And so it was at the end of the day, he walks in and he says, "Hey, Shane, before we talk about the house, I just got to ask you, and maybe you don't even realize this, but you have no idea. I got to ask, how did you assemble this team?" And I'm like, what are you getting at? He said, "Well, I don't think you understand. Look around. Look at the people you have here." And I was really ashamed of myself that I haven't done that in quite a while, because boy, we do have an awesome team. And so when you talk about people that why aren't they lining up and wanting to come to work? It may just be that we already got the best of the best, and frankly, we do have quite a few folks waiting to be called back, especially when we talk about the Bakken in North Dakota, that folks, yeah, it is true. So we got to do a better job of broadcasting our story. And I think this is a takeaway from our conference that we had out in the Bakken, the annual Bakken show, when they talked about ESG, environmental social governance, and doing a better job of explaining who you are as a company and how you're dealing with that buzzword. And so many of the oil producers, when they got up, they said, "We've done a good job talking about portions of this, but the easiest one on the social side, we've done a terrible job doing it because we forget to brag about ourselves." It's not human nature, especially out of a Midwestern hard-working blue-collar person. They usually ain't going to stand up, and that's why it's uncomfortable to grab a mic and even brag about what you're doing, right? But it's important. We have to tell the story, and we don't have to brag about it. Because let's be honest, was last week a challenging week? I think we had many challenging times, right? Jeremy and I talked several times about various financial challenges. I know John and I had conversation about an employee issue. You and I certainly did. I heard you guys in a conference. I mean, you were several hours dealing with an employee issue on Friday. It was a tough week, and I don't know, how was it Permian?
I don't know. It was good and bad. I'd say overall it was a positive trip, but there was definitely some challenges there as well.
In what way? What were the challenges?
It seems like we got a good team down there, but there's just not quite enough work right now. There's people are trying to find things to do, and when you got a team of folks who are there to work, they want to work, and there's just nothing for them to do. Maybe challenges come up that wouldn't be there if they were just busy.
This whole comment that we've talked a lot about as a leadership team, that is, if people are chasing their tail, they're just happier people, right?
Right.
So tell me more about this lack of work. Why do you think we have a lack of work down in the Permian? I mean, oil is $71 a barrel.
Right. I honestly, I think it's just because the one customer we do work for is going through some changes right now with the recent merger, and they're not releasing work as they normally would with the oil prices rebounding like this. I think it'll come. In fact, at the meeting we had with the supervisor down there, he said to expect towards the end of the year for things to start getting busy, but they're just kind of in a lull right now. And being they're our one major client down there, it just puts us in a tough spot. We really need to focus on getting a large scale client down in the Permian.
So when you were down there, did you talk to any of the individuals there about how we could pull that off? How do we get that next big client?
Right. We talked a little bit about it, but honestly, I think we need to go knock down some doors and talk to people. And I don't know that we have anyone on our team down there who really feels comfortable just going, cold call, new customer. This is who we are. This is what we do. We got a really good team that, kind of like you said before, who can, once we have the relationship, they can maintain it and build on it. But making that first contact, we need to, I guess, help them out with that.
So when I've been, because oftentimes you guys have asked me that this is my responsibility to go break down that door. And when we had the meeting a few months ago down a couple hours away, a random phone call from a mill that found us online, and we went, and it felt like we rocked that meeting. It was just awesome. And sure enough, now we got a crew embedded down there working. What do I need to do differently? Is this content building podcast stuff? How do you feel about it?
I don't know. I'm actually, I would say, the most skeptical person in the room here on it. But I think that if everyone else on the team feels it's a route we need to go, I'm all in. It's worth a try. I definitely trust everyone here's thoughts on that. And I just, in my mind, it's an experiment. It's not in any way like a sure thing, or even the way that the world is nowadays, or anything like that. I think, especially going after, say, industrial clients, large corporations, it may work, maybe, I've kind of ran it through my mind, maybe supervisors we work for on their free time, they do listen to stuff like this, podcasts and so on, and use that to sway their decisions on who's doing the work. But I haven't, myself, the ones I know, I haven't seen that in them. They seem more like they are the Midwestern hard worker kind of people who maybe don't spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, maybe go work hard all day and then go home and go hunting or something, you know. But I could be misreading it. I'm certainly worth giving it a try.
And Calvin, I think that's an important thing that we have to figure out as a leadership team. You know, that is exactly who our target market client is. Because they're hardworking, good style people. How many hours a week are they working? Yeah. 40 plus, right? They don't have tons of time. So where are they going to figure out when they get a work order at 3:00 on Friday afternoon and they have a weekend planned with their family? Where are they going to figure out who to call? They're just going through their phone, whoever they trust that they already know.
Right.
But the first time, where are they going? Where do you go when you need something at home? Google. Okay. So what happens when you Google anything? Whoever's got the most content out there is the one that Google, the algorithms that are set up, they're going to go find somebody who's active, and that's who's going to be displayed, right? So when you think about the relationship that we're currently building with the mill, and actually there's 2 mills, right, that we're working with, both found us online. True enough?
Yeah. True.
Okay. So how did they initially find us online? We must be doing a good job. I don't think we're doing a good job, but we're doing some sort of a job at building that presence, right? And when you use the word experiment, I agree with it. I think that's why it's taken me probably 3 months to get you guys down here. Like, I had to get comfortable with it. And I did a couple entrepreneurial style podcasts with a few folks, and I saw all kinds of hits on that. But what about when we did the video work, say 4 months ago, or 4 years ago? Were you skeptical when we did our first video?
Not really. I think it's different. It's a lot easier to watch something with video, not just audio, for one. There's something that just holds people's attention. Like if I go and I Google a company, for instance, I go to their website. If they got a quick 30-second video, I watch it. I don't know if I would listen to a podcast. The only podcasts I've ever listened to are the ones you've done, just because I know you and, you know, I'm curious, right? Like John said, and, you know, it gives you some, like, you know what you're talking about if you do a podcast. Not to me. To me, I don't trust you just because you do a podcast. I would rather read a book. I feel like anybody can say what they want on a podcast or on YouTube or something like that. And the biggest way I can see, or the thing that maybe seems like the biggest benefit of a podcast, is maybe finding additional employees or people, you know, who are good at what they do but are looking for a better place to work. I can see that being maybe a larger benefit of a podcast, but I don't know. I know nothing about podcasts. I don't even know who listens to podcasts. I just know that I don't, and most people that I know don't.
Well, you know, someone told me once that everyone's listening to podcasts, and I think I challenged John even when we first started our conversation that start asking around. If you see somebody with earbuds in, ask them what they're listening to. And when you're out on a construction site, you'll see a lot of folks with earbuds in. And in fact, you guys remember, didn't we have to come up with a policy about earbuds in our shop? Right, we did. Okay, what are those folks listening to?
Possibly podcasts. But here's the other piece of it too then, is where do they find these podcasts? Like I'm imagining if these are people who are listening to podcasts all the time, they're going to on an app or some website, right, where there's all sorts of podcasts, and then they, you know, find what kind of topic or subject they want to listen to, and then they select it. I don't imagine they're just randomly scrolling through LinkedIn and then selecting a podcast and listening. Usually if someone's just scrolling through LinkedIn, they're just mindlessly scrolling, right? They don't have a lot of time to stop and listen to a podcast.
Except for if you're like our Permian manager, Joey, you know what he sent me on over the weekend? He was mindlessly scrolling through LinkedIn, saw a solar project in Wisconsin, messaged me the thing, you know, and actually I was able to get the woman's email address and send her an introduction email this morning, right? But I think you're right. There is a segment of the population that never will listen to a podcast, but having the podcast allows you to get a little short clip that you can put on LinkedIn with the video that helps tie it together. So the podcast allows you to have more of a presence online and capture the audience that does want to listen to the whole thing, but it also reminds those folks that are just mindlessly scrolling through that you're there and there's a video. Right. So I don't ever envision a podcast without some sort of a video link, is how I'm feeling.
It's all part of the whole package. Like, it's not just a podcast, but I envision it like this background check. So I want to investigate who Shane is. So I'm going to look at Shane Stolp, and he has platforms on Instagram. He has Facebook. He has LinkedIn. He has these different things. And between all this stuff, including what comes out of his mouth, gives me a picture of who he is and what he's about. And if I like the whole package, that's what I mean about building credibility. It's not like because, I'm in my mom's basement saying the Martians are coming, that, you know what I mean? Right. That all of a sudden I have this credibility of, well, yeah, the Martians are coming. So it's one piece of the puzzle of the whole package.
Right. And that's, I guess I agree with. I think we should try it, and it likely is one piece of the puzzle. I think we just got to remember that, in my mind, the larger piece of the puzzle, but at least an equivalent piece of the puzzle, is going out there and doing a good job for people, and then that word of mouth. It seems like where do I get credibility? If I'm going to hire someone to do a job, if I hear somebody say that they did a good job, that's credibility.
Right. I think that's such an important point, that we have to remember that we can spend thousands of dollars on marketing, but if go down this road of like trying to build this big business, but if you don't have a client who appreciates what you're doing, then you're marketing for naught. Then nothing's going to happen. Right. So we have to ultimately make sure that we're going for the right person. And you touched on it a little bit, Calvin, when you said, it's what do we work for? Maybe a dozen clients tops. And we have, what do we have, John? 120, 30 employees out working for those folks. Like, these are multi-million-dollar contracts that we have, right? It shows how important each individual relationship is. And I don't think those folks make a decision based on one podcast. They don't make a decision based on one Instagram post or anything. You remember the particular client that started following us on LinkedIn, and he followed us for a good year before we went to work for him, right? He made sure that we were the right client. So I think it talks about John's story, that they believe who you are. What were you going to say, Jeremy? I feel like you were.
Yeah, I was going to say something. I think along with this, to Calvin's point, to build credibility, we had this interview down at the Coal Docks, remember, with one of the supervisors there, and that got posted in different places, I suppose. But I think I recall seeing it on, was it LinkedIn? Or that, I think, is going to build credibility with our future clients. If we can get people that we work for and get them to come in and sit down and have a little conversation with them about why they chose Wescom, what do they value about Wescom? What's the future with Wescom and this certain client? That I think that's huge. That does more, maybe even than me talking about why Wescom's so great. And I mean, I can all day long tell everybody why Wescom's so great, but I want my clients, I want our clients to tell the story too. I think that's equally important,
if not even more. Right.
Absolutely.
When we were after I got done with our run this morning, I was talking to another business owner, and it does not matter what you think. Of course, you believe there's all kinds of value in what you're selling or what you're doing. But guess what? If the market doesn't believe it, it don't matter. Right. It's just flat, not there at all. So, Calvin, if I understand from you, you're in agreement that we should give this a try, but let's make sure that we do not forget. Ultimately, we got to be banging on doors, and we got to follow it up with top-notch operations.
Correct.
True enough?
True.
Okay, Jeremy, you talked about ROI and KPIs, I think, is one way that we can measure it. John, I'm getting the sense from you that you're like, let's not forget that we're telling a story, and that we're also using this for potential employees just as well as clients. And then John, I'm getting the impression from you, like, we got to do something. We got folks that, especially in the Twin Ports market, who we owe it to keep them busy. And there's all kinds of people who need to hear about us.
Yeah, I do think it's important we get out there, get people on the team that are like testimonials, that it's a great place to work.
So if we're going to go down this, we don't use the word if at Wescom. Can you believe it? You guys, none of you called me out on that. We don't use the word if. And
we have an audience, so I wasn't going to call you out on it.
No, it doesn't matter. We still call each other out. So when we go down this road of starting a podcast, there's all kinds of considerations. One, what are we going to target? And I think, Calvin, it goes back to, you were saying, how do people even find? I got sent a link from a buddy that talked about even just titling your podcast and how people search. So, our mission is out to energize America, but we need to do Energizing America, energizing your workplace and your communities through ideas or through energy, because then we can cover employee development. We can talk about what energy does within a person, what it does within a business, and then we can also talk about how we're an energy expert. We know how to get oil and gas out of the ground and out to market. We know how to help our producers get their sites energized. We know how to get folks, onto a renewable. If that's the route they want to go, we can help bridge that gap. At the same exact time, we can talk about what happens when you work for the right company and how much energy you can get in your own personal life. And before you know it, you're starting a family with a house. Right? Like I think if we get that title right, we can capture everything that we talked about here today. But it's going to require, I do not want to forget, like everything at Wescom, we always have to remind ourselves that, we're out to build customers for life, serving with integrity, creating opportunities, and empowering people. The only way we do that, we expect it out of our team. Urgent, accountable, and flexible. And like we talk every time we have a leadership meeting, we got to expect the same thing out of ourselves. So I'll work with, I think probably John will be working with you to come up with some KPIs, because in addition to your HR role, have you offered to help me with the marketing, or have I asked you to?
Yeah, voluntold.
Well, what was that word, voluntold? I've never heard it. That's awesome. So you and I will work up with some key performance indicators on if this is a successful deal. I got to work with Jeremy on the contract stuff to just kind of see if this is, how long do we go? I think, like our leadership team, like our employees, we require flexible, accountability, urgent. Same thing will be with this contract, that we make sure there's a lot of flexibility built into it. And then John, I think we need to have with John a really healthy conversation about which clients we're specifically targeting right here in the Twin Ports market so that we can drive the podcast towards it. And then I think, Calvin, you and I, as we continue to build this is where I lean heavily on you. And I think we can all agree on this, that we really appreciate when you remind us operations. And John, you're always long-term. I appreciate that. Jeremy's finance, part of it. And John reminding us that, hey, we do have a story here. Let's not forget who we are. Let's go forward with this, all remembering exactly that we expect that out of each other and be willing to ask those questions. So I think with that, we'll call it a done deal, and we'll circle back in another week and give you guys an update. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.